Welcome to the Evolve Podcast, a podcast about disrupting your life to spark new evolution. Evolve your body, evolve your mind, evolve your soul, and evolve your tribe. And now it's time to disrupt.
Okay, and we're live. Myles, how you doing today?
Steve Cutler. It's been a while.
Yeah, we took a short break there for a bit. I've been
Yeah.
busy and had to take a pause for a little bit as we were making some changes and adjustments to schedule. But it's good to be back with you, man.
Yeah. And I went through that 3.5 weeks without a phone.
You did,
And
yeah.
and that was
How was
pretty
that?
amazing.
You had a phone that broke, and
Yeah,
so
so
you had to.
just
You didn't have one for quite a while.
3 weeks. So it was a
Wow.
combination of small townness, tech
Small
misunderstanding.
townness. I like that.
Well,
Okay.
I'll tell you the small townness came from when first of all, when I broke my phone, I was really worried. I was like, God, I just spent money on this phone, and then a friend of mine, our local bartender, said, why don't you just call the company and see if they'll give you a refund? So the phone had
Okay.
already been broken for 2 days. So I called the company up and they said, yeah, you're eligible for a refund. And they said, pack up everything that you got because once we get all your stuff, we'll determine whether we give you a refund. So everything that came with it, SIM cards, charger, all the stuff. So I packed it up. I take it over to the UPS store. And the UPS store, this is where the small townness comes in. The UPS store told me, well, you just missed the FedEx drop and they won't come back until next week. So we'll have your phone here for a week.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And
So
then
your
I found
phone
out
sat at the store for a week.
at the UPS store in this small town.
That's
So,
awesome. I didn't know
so
that. Okay.
I know. And then after the week was up, I was telling somebody about it and they said, there's a FedEx drop box on campus. And I didn't know that. So
Oh,
I knew it was too
wow.
late.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I sent them all the stuff. So they took their time, they got it. It took them a few days to get it, unpack it. And then they sent me back a notice saying, you are eligible for a refund. So I said, well, instead of doing a refund, can you just give me the same phone? And they said, no, we have to go through the refund repurchase process.
Oh, you're
So
kidding.
that took a couple of days. So they did it. I bought another phone and I upgraded phone. So I got one a little more expensive. And when they sent it back, I set up everything, went to activate it through their website and it wouldn't activate. I called them up and the woman said, oh, we're not sure why it didn't activate. What's your SIM card number? I give her the SIM card number. And she says, that's not the one we have on file. I said, you just sent me a new SIM card. She said, oh, that's the problem. You were not supposed to send your own SIM cards. So now we
Oh,
have to go
no.
through the process more of reactivating the new SIM card. That will take 3 to 5 business days.
Oh, you got to be kidding. Where are you buying this from? Did you just buy this phone from some guy that's sitting on the corner? Homeless
No,
guy walks up to you, opens up his coat, and has a bunch of phones in
it's funny because that's what it sounds like.
yeah, it
I belong
sounds
to
like
this company
this.
called Republic Wireless. And the reason why I like Republic Wireless, first of all, once you get going, the service is really good. It's not expensive. And they're one of
Okay.
those companies that's ecologically sensitive to the environment and all that stuff. So they try to do things, based on helping the environment and stuff like that.
So they're
So
not clubbing baby stills and that sort of thing.
no, they're
Okay,
not clubbing
all right.
baby seals and they're not destroying, the grasslands and the trees and all that stuff. But they do take a hell
The
of a
thing
long time to
is,
get your
yeah,
shit.
3.5 weeks without a phone. Now, for most people, I think that would be a problem. For you, that definitely was not a problem. When I talked to you the other day, after we've been messaging back and forth on social media, we finally got on the phone, and you were elated about this 3.5 weeks without the phone.
Well, I had that post where I put on Facebook. I said, my phone died and I went to heaven.
What'd you do
Because
during those 3.5 weeks? So most people, like I said, most people would be going crazy without a telephone for 3.5 weeks. What did you do?
3 days in, I went crazy. I did.
Okay.
There's a woman, Terry Gross on NPR. did a whole expose. She was talking to this businesswoman. I forgot the businesswoman's name, who literally were talking about what happens when you lose or forget your phone, and even if you drive out of your house and you leave it at home. The
A
first
lot of people
couple of
call
hours,
it phone anxiety.
yes, you get
Yeah,
go through the anxiety. I went through
yeah.
that. I went through all 3 days, 3 days, and and actually at each successive day, the anxiety would lessen and lessen. And
Mm.
then the fourth day was this extraordinary blanket of peace. It was nothing. Like I was like, what does this phone represent? That I went through that, and now I don't give a fuck. It coincided with Alicia, Tiago, and David going on vacation to Rhode Island. And Alicia said, if you want to watch my dog and have run of the house. And she's got a deck that sits in the back that's stunning with what you see. And I would go there every day with a couple of books, brew coffee, sit on the deck. Tremendous amounts of meditation,
Wow.
tremendous amount of internal work with my journals and particular books that I've
And
been.
sitting outside, because this is it's spring, summertime, right?
Yeah, we had the
Yep.
stunning days,
Hmm.
80 degrees to 85 degrees, the cicadas, and back and behind our house is a menagerie of different types of birds, and they have all these bird feeders up
Okay.
that 5 feet away from me, and I'm looking at cardinals and woodpeckers just
Oh,
come and eat the
yeah.
food, the squirrels, the
I
deer that
love the
run around in the
Cardinals in
back.
Ohio.
Yeah, oh, that's
They're
right.
beautiful.
You're familiar with those birds.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Cincinnati, when we lived over there, it was beautiful, beautiful birds.
Yeah.
So you
So I
had this
sat there
amazing experience for about 2.5 weeks.
exactly 2.5 weeks.
About, yeah, about a week or so of trying to get it fixed, a little bit of anxiety, and then you've got 2.5 weeks or so of just
Yeah,
deep meditation, deep reading,
yeah,
deep work.
yeah. I didn't go to the places I normally go to, my little watering hole at the restaurant.
Hmm.
I didn't go there. What I was playing with is trying to understand like everything in your environment. When I say environment, your internal environment and your external environment, people,
Yeah.
spaces, places serve as a certain type of trigger, good or bad.
Yep. Right.
And I was trying to get one of the journal that I was writing in. I was trying to write down what the triggers were, and that was pretty amazing work because I started to realize what the subtle triggers were. The obvious triggers are obvious, people that make you feel negative, or people you want to argue with, or people that get you excited. But I was thinking more along the lines of subtle triggers, the little
And those are
tiny
difficult
things.
to see in the moment,
Yeah,
right? When you go back to them
yeah,
over and over and over again, you don't really see them. And that's why it's important to have some sort of distance from those things that trigger you, both positive and
yeah,
negative, right? I mean, when we say
yeah,
trigger, we're not just talking about something that's negative. We're talking about your environment the external environment in particular can trigger certain emotions. When I walk into certain rooms in my house, I feel like I want to do something. I want to take a nap, or I want to sit down and read,
yeah,
or I want to,
yeah,
I'm anxious and ready to go. But yeah, the environment is important, internal and external environment. But the external environment is important because it does trigger us. And far too
yeah,
often, we don't even pay attention to that. I think environment also plays a huge role in our habits. I was talking to somebody the other day about this concept of environment and habit. And he said, well, I don't think I can do this, getting in shape thing. And I said, but think about this for just a second. You've got habits already, right? You're getting
right,
up at a certain time every day. You're eating food at a regular cadence. All getting healthy is, or losing body fat is you're just replacing one small habit with another.
right,
So instead of waking up and not going and doing push-ups or not doing something, just add one thing and
yeah,
then create a habit that you can keep for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Make it small
yeah,
because when that happens over time, that will compound. But it's the environment that helps to trigger that. If you wake up and you've already got your workout clothes sitting out, or if you walk into a kitchen where you've already purchased health promoting foods, the habits are going to be much easier to jump
Yeah.
into. But
Yeah.
environment is a massive trigger for us.
Well, what's really interesting is it's what I learned in some of these excursions into myself were a lot of my bad habits or just other habits were acquired seamlessly.
Mm,
And because they're seamless, they almost feel natural. And when you're trying to create a new habit, it's you're conscious that you got to create a new habit. I got to get in shape. I got to lose body fat. I got to lower my cholesterol. I got to lower my blood, whatever it is. Or
yeah,
even taking on a
yeah.
new project. You could be a 100% healthy person and decide to take on a new hobby.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That new hobby is not seamless. If you
No.
started playing guitar when you were one, all of a sudden their habit is just seamless of getting up and practicing, like me and the piano. But my piano bad habits are seamless. And now since I'm trying to correct some of those, it's a disruption.
Yeah, it really is. Well,
you know,
great habits. If you want to become something great in any area of life, you have to start with very small habits. I love the word seamless because the most healthy people that I know, they don't think of their health as anything different than who they are, meaning that
yeah,
it's woven into the tapestry, right? Everything they do is health promoting, health conscious. I think to myself every time that I'm eating a donut or a cookie or something that might be more of a treat that I like, there's a health
right,
component to that. It might be a mental health component. There may be a
right,
social component to it, but it's
yeah,
health promoting. And I don't sit and just eat an entire box of donuts by myself because I don't think that that's a health promoting thing for me.
yeah,
Now, if I'm sitting around and we're having a great time as a family or with friends and we're eating dessert together that we're sharing, I'll definitely eat that and I'll enjoy it. But the healthiest people, the wealthiest people, the most successful in any area of life, I think that they find a way to create these threads in the tapestry of their life to where they're not shifting from one thing to another. And they're not saying, okay, well, I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to lose weight because I'm fat, right? They don't do that. The healthy people say, I am healthy and I'm going to layer in these little healthy habits. If you want to become very good at any aspect of life, it's
yeah.
about layering in these little pieces. Well, before we get too far into this, Miles, I want to welcome our all of our listeners out there to the episode, and we're excited to be back and dropping a different episode this time because our guest is our co-host. So joining me from Oberlin, Ohio, the most interesting man that I know is W. Myles Riley. Welcome, Miles.
Steve, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be back. It's good to
It is good to be back.
reconnect
Good
with
to
our
see your face
guests.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see yours and connect with our guests or reconnect with our guests and, you know, get back on this train and talk about health and wellness and all the other stuff that goes along with evolving.
All the great things with evolving. And in the mountains of Utah, I am Steve Cutler. Like I mentioned before, today our guest is my co-host, W. Myles Riley. And Miles, I want to let our listeners know why we're doing what we're doing today. We had a conversation just like we always do. I can't remember if you called me or I called you, and we're talking, and you had mentioned this meditative process that you were going through,
Mm.
and noticing some of the resistance that you were encountering as you're going through your
Yeah,
meditation practice, and then working through that resistance. Now,
yeah,
if anybody out there has read Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, not The Art of War by Sun Tzu, but Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, you'll know what we're talking about when we talk about resistance. If you haven't read it, let me just kind of give a brief recap. So let's say that you want to start a new project. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a new business. You're a pianist like Miles, or you're a visual artist like I am, or you're just trying to create something new in your life. Maybe it's a better relationship, and you start to work on it. The initial feeling that you have every time you go into that work is what Pressfield has identified as resistance. It's always there. It will never not be there. And the way that we overcome resistance is just through consistency and commitment to a process. And so when Miles and I were talking the other day, I was really fascinated by this idea that he'd been playing with relative to his meditation. And I think that, like all great things, through practice, he's developed a process that I think would be very helpful for our listeners, for you, our listeners that are trying to evolve your personal life. Now, Miles, you know, I know, and I think a lot of our listeners know meditation has so many benefits to the brain and body, but it can also be an intimidating thing for many people to get started. So today I want to give our listeners some practical tools and some insights into the process that you're using so that we can get them started. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Perfect.
All right. So I'm thinking that we keep it simple for our
Okay.
listeners. Let's break it up into the why and the how. So let's start with the why. Why do you spend so much time practicing meditation?
Um, well, for one reason, I don't know where this idea came from, but through all of my readings and living experiences, um, I started to realize that we never get to stop.
Mm, hmm.
Just stop.
It's pretty rare.
Right. We live in a culture that its underpinnings are production, production, make things happen. Always, we move all the time. And years ago, I started to wonder what would happen if we just stopped. And I would try to stop. And in trying to stop, I was really fucking uncomfortable
Yeah,
stopping
yeah.
to just sit. I told you the story before. As I started to learn how to stop more and more, there was the time I was coming to teach a yoga class at Lifetime on a Sunday, and I was on
Oh, I love this
I-15.
story.
Yeah,
This is
and
one
I
of
was
my
on
favorite stories.
I-15,
Yeah.
and it's Sunday, so there's very little traffic, and I happened to be on the road at about 12:30 because the class started at 1, and it was really nobody on the highway. And the next car might have been 300 yards behind me. So I just stopped and sat there. I didn't pull over to the side. I stopped in the middle of the highway.
And I think it's been years since you've done this. And so if any Utah Highway Patrol are listening to this, they can't peg you for it.
Yeah, unless they're gonna come to Ohio and serve me a
They're
warrant.
not going to come to Oberlin, Ohio to get you. Yeah. So you stopped in
and
the middle of the highway.
and it was an overwhelming feeling because I would think that's the one place you're not supposed to stop.
I would agree with you there. You're
Yeah,
not supposed to stop on the freeway. Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
think
I
that's kind of
just
against the law.
right. and and the feeling was it was overwhelming because and obviously there might have been a certain excitement because you're not supposed to do that, but the philosophical and psychological and emotional part was I literally stopped in a place where you should be going
Mhm.
all the time, constant movement. If you're going to stop on a highway, you pull over to the sides. And that made me start to think about many different things that you're not supposed to really stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started playing with it all the time. I would catch myself eating, just gobbling up food, and I would just stop and watch myself or pause I would talk to people, and people are really cool triggers, good and bad. People force you to be who you are based on your relationship with them. So you're a particular way.
Yeah.
And if you want to try to be another way, you have to stop and think about the other way, which can actually make you look kind of crazy, especially if you're talking to someone and you all of a sudden get conscious of this idea, and then you stop and allow the new things that you've built inside of you to come out. You can look pretty schizophrenic,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
for sure.
that's their perspective. Your perspective is you know what you've done. This is the person that I'm trying to get to, and the other person is that old person. So you have to pause. And it can feel extremely liberating and uncomfortable. So I've been playing with this for a long, long time now.
So the idea of pausing, I'm a huge fan of that, and I agree. We live in so many spaces, not just the freeway, but the day to day of our life that cause us to keep moving forward in many
Yeah.
different ways. Unfortunately, that's why so many people feel like they're spinning their wheels. Now, I think that oftentimes when you want to change something and you're in a relationship, and I think a lot of our listeners will resonate with what you just said, that you are who you are in that relationship partially because of your how you relate, how you
Right.
interact,
Right.
what's the vibration back and forth that you have with that other human being. And if you want to change it, you do need to pause. Now, I also think that it's helpful so that you don't look a little bit crazy to say, you know what? I used to interact with you in this way because that's the way our relationship was. I'm trying to evolve into a better human being. And so, would you give me some grace? Would you give me a little bit of time? Would you give me permission to do something in a different way? I've done that. Not necessarily those words, and it's empowering what happens. You see, anytime that we try
Those are
to
beautiful
improve
words, by the way.
ourselves, thank you.
Yeah, they
Anytime we
really
try and
were.
improve ourselves, what happens is the crab effect happens, or the crab effect takes place. And for those that don't know what the crab effect is if you put a bunch of crabs in a hole in the sand, they will not help each other get out. As soon as one crab starts going up, the other crab will pull on it and pull it back down, and they will keep doing this ad nauseum until they never get out and they all die. It's a natural human reaction. It's part of our fear mechanism that's built into us.
Right.
And the way that we break that crab effect with the people that are in our lives, because oftentimes the people that are pulling us down are the people that are closest to us. They say, wait a minute, Miles, I know who you are. And this thing you're doing, this way that you're acting is not you. Well, they know who you used to be. If you're evolving, now they need to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I think it's important to talk about that. So pausing and having that conversation, I think, goes a long way. But let's jump real quick to one of the biggest challenges that I think, Miles, people have when they start a meditation practice is that they don't see or feel any benefit early on. In fact, it's more difficult. It's more frustrating. They're thinking, what the hell am I doing sitting here? Why am I, this has no value, right? I've got stuff I could do. I've got stuff that could be done. Every once in a while, there might be that sense of calm or peace,
Right.
but most of the time, they don't feel the benefit early on. Why do you think meditation is something that people need to stick with?
One of the reasons why I think they need to stick with it is one, to become aware of habitual movement patterns. And let's we just go physical first.
Okay.
Um, how many times the things that we do in our lives that are habitual physical movements that we have elevated to a level of importance,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really not that important, but it just becomes part of this movement patterns, this habituation. And
So give an example of that. What's an example of a habitual movement pattern that you've seen?
well, so yesterday when I was meditating, first of all, I sat down, and since I'm aware of it now, I'm aware of it now. I sat down and I prepare for habitual or just movement patterns. I'll sit down, and yesterday I sat down and I realized that a day before, a yoga teacher contacted me who wanted to get in touch. She wanted to get in touch with me so that we could begin this program at his yoga studio. And I forgot to return the text. I hadn't gotten in
Mhm.
touch with him. As soon as
Yeah.
I sat down, I was maybe a minute into just sitting, because when I meditate, the first thing I do is I just sit down. I don't close my eyes and start, you know, breathing and all that. I just sit down because I'm waiting for the habitual patterns. So anyway, I sat down, and the first thing that hit me was, oh, you got to text Eric back.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I smiled. I was like, okay, here you are. Okay, who else is coming? Who else is coming? The second one was, shit, I forgot to brush my teeth.
So think about this. I can't remember what the study or what the number was that I read the other day, but there's a number out there
Uh,
of how many times, and it blew me away. I think that's part of the reason why I couldn't remember the number, but it blew me away how many times people touch their phone in an hour. And this would be a
yeah,
challenge I would put out there to our listeners is pay attention to how many times you feel prompted internally to touch your phone. When you said, hey, I've got this guy that I forgot to text back, habitually, you're going to reach
yeah,
and you're going to tap your phone. That's the normal thing, right? Oh, I forgot to brush my teeth. The movement pattern is get up and go brush your teeth. And
right.
so the body is pushing you towards that. So I think
That's
that's a
right.
great example that
Yeah,
it's about paying attention to these movement patterns. And the movement patterns are like gravity.
yeah.
They will pull you back over and over and over again. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't stick with it at the very beginning.
Because it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Want to just to get, and you know, and they're basically what they are. They're really charged thoughts. And
Mhm.
one of the great things that you can get from this is to see how powerful thought, how powerfully energetic thoughts are to make you want to move, because you sit there, you get a thought, you know, return the text, and you feel it in your body. Your body actually wants to get up,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
start to think about, wow, how many other thoughts do I have that literally force a tremendous amount of energy and feeling in my body? Think about the negative things, you know, the negative experiences and the negative, you know, I thought about this a couple of weeks ago is, you know, no matter what the news is, it always has to be bad. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's the way they're structured. It has to
They
be
they
bad.
only put a happy news story at the very end of the newscast, and that's
Right,
only locally. If it's national news, it's never positive.
right. And no
Yeah.
matter where the source comes from, you know, I love
Yep.
NPR, I love their human interest stuff, but
Yep.
everything is about like some tragic, something negative happening.
Right.
And so you get these thoughts in your head, and they can move you. They can move you. And I'll let you get to your next question, but it really hit me when I think about all of these mass shootings. They come from a place of a young man most of the time
Yep.
sitting and thinking. And then he says, I gotta act on this thought.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
only thing that can happen,
What was
regardless
the
of the
quote? There was a quote. Stephen Covey, I think, quoted it in his book, if I remember right, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. That between stimulus and response, there's
yeah,
a space.
the gap.
In that space, yeah, in that gap. So in that space, we have complete power and freedom to choose our response. I'm paraphrasing now, but in our responses lie our growth and development.
Yeah,
And I absolutely love that idea that it's in the space, it's in the gaps, it's in visual art, we call it the negative space, right? It's between the tree and the house, it's between the person and the building. It's the negative space that is what creates the beauty in our life. And this is something that when I've taught leaders over the years how to coach people, one of the toughest things for them to coach, or for me to coach them on, or for them to really resonate with, is this idea that they need to pause. As soon as they ask a question, pause. Let the other person answer the question. When they've made a point, when they've said, hey, here's how I see this challenge we're running into, especially if it's a tough conversation, a difficult point, they need to pause right afterwards. I've taught this to salespeople. As soon as they have put the offer out there and trying to close the deal, they just need to shut up. They need to pause. Right. Because it's in that space where people are able to respond in a very positive way. And so coming back to what you were talking about before, it's the movement or sometimes the lack of movement that we've got to be aware of. And I think that's the most difficult part at the very beginning. Well, Myles, the Mayo Clinic published an article that listed the following benefits of consistent meditation practice. I want to know from you what stands out. And I'm curious for our listeners too, what resonates with them. In fact, hey, if you're listening to this episode and you've seen some benefits from meditation, send us a DM on Instagram with the word meditate in all caps and tell us how meditation has benefited you. We're going to pick a random listener and send them an Evolve hat. So again, go onto our Instagram, follow the Instagram, send us the word meditate, and tell us what one of the benefits of meditation that you've seen in your personal life. Not the theory, not this article, but what have you seen in your personal life? And we're going to pick one of our listeners to send an Evolve hat to. Okay, Myles, you ready for the list?
Ready? Here we go.
All right. Mayo Clinic says that meditation, quote, meditation can give you a sense of calm, peace, and balance that can benefit both your emotional well-being and your overall health. So things like gaining a new perspective on stressful situations, building skills to manage your stress, increasing your self-awareness, focusing on the present, reducing negative emotions, increasing imagination and creativity, increasing patience and tolerance, lowering resting heart rate and blood pressure, and finally, improving sleep quality. What resonates with you from that list, Myles?
Wow, like all of them.
Because you've been doing it for a while, right?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a while.
You've probably seen these benefits.
Amit Goswami, one of my mantras that I use, he says, what we aim for in meditation is to reduce our near 100 probability of a fixed response to a conditioned stimulus.
Oh, I like that. Say that again.
What we aim for in meditation is to reduce our near 100% probability of a fixed response to a conditioned stimulus.
Yeah, beautiful.
So it's like you're watching all your responses and then pay attention to what's stimulating those responses, stimulus and response.
Yep.
And you just said something earlier, the gap. And so everything that you just listed, everything you just listed resonates with me because I'm in the thick of this now. The better sleep, just emotional. I've used meditation most powerfully to how I deal with my son, because as all dads, your first response are going to be in raising a kid is the response you got from your dad.
Yep.
For the most part, there's some things, I loved my father. I think most of the stuff that he did with me, I loved. I do that with my son. But there are some other things that I thought, nah. That response has to change. And
there's
because
some generational things, right? I mean, there's some things that maybe he said or did back then that was fine, and generationally, we're in a different spot.
We're in a different spot, exactly. And there were some things I wanted to change. And what was really interesting is because it's my son, the trigger is really emotional.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the hard one. And the gap really started to show me. And then once I saw me, I had a firmer grasp on what would I like to change now that I can really see me. And then you just start writing down how I would like to respond, and then trying to integrate those new responses into dealing with my son. And it has been amazing.
It's amazing. That's a skill set, right? You're developing a set of skills that you can use in interacting with your son. And anybody can do this with any type of relationship. It's easy to just continue on and say, well, this is how I am, or that person's a better speaker, or they're really, they're an amazing wordsmith. Anyone could learn this. You can look at any situation in your life that you're having a difficult time with, spend some time meditating on it, and then ask yourself, why did I respond that way? And what can I do different? And then, like you said, write it down, recreate it. I mean, that's all creation is understanding first and foremost, and then recreating it. And then you just practice it. Do it over and over again, right?
And you practice it in your meditation. Like that, then I would go, I'd have certain meditation practices where I close my eyes and imagine the new responses to old triggers.
Right.
And when you see it happen, when it becomes a living, breathing part of you, this new way of responding to an old trigger, that's freedom.
Yeah, big time. See, like you, I will find those things in meditation. The one thing that I do different is as soon as I find something that I want to do different in the future, and I say, okay, now I'm aware of this situation. If something like this comes up in the future, which most types of situations repeat themselves in life, right? It's the karmic effect. I will pause, I will look at it, and I will say, this is why I'm responding this way. I understand myself now because I've meditated on it. The way I change it is I will write it out, and then I will kind of memorize what I want to do, and I will actually stand in the mirror. I will stand in front of a mirror, or as I'm driving to the gym in the morning or whatever it is, I will verbally talk out loud, speak to myself. I will pay attention to the 3 V's of communication, the visual, verbal, and voice. So I'm paying attention to the visual, how's my posture? I'm paying attention to the verbal, what am I saying? I'm paying attention to the voice, which is my tone and my timbre and the volume. And I pay attention to those things and retrain my mind with how I want to respond in the future. And the reason I look in the mirror, now I'm not driving down the road staring in the mirror the whole time, but I may look up into the rearview mirror so that I'm paying attention to what my face is doing while I'm responding to that particular situation. And what it does is it brings more feedback, more awareness, because oftentimes we miss the subtleties of our own expressions, these micro expressions of the shoulders raising, or the tenseness of the neck, or the eyebrows going up, or the angry face, whatever it is. We miss those things unless we train it, and we can retrain these things. So I'm with you on that. I think that we find those things in meditation, we write them down, and then we practice them. Now, let's get in. We've talked about the why. I know our listeners may be sitting on the fence with this next piece, because there might be some people saying, well, hey, Myles, you can meditate and you can read for hours a day. You have this opportunity, and I'm just a busy guy, or I'm a busy girl. I can't do this, right? I imagine that I can see a listener in my mind, 35 years old, 40 years old. He's trying to go to the job, get the thing done. He's got kids. He's juggling all of these different things. And he says, Myles, that's great for you, but that's not my life. I'm too busy to do this. Right. So for that person, I would just say this: what we're going to talk about relative to the how, the principles can be applied, whether you've got 5 minutes to meditate, or whether you've got an hour to meditate, or regardless, it doesn't really matter, right? So let's talk about the how. Walk our listeners through the practice that you use.
So over time, I've built a list of 9 different things that I try to connect with. And each one of those things propels me a little deeper into the meditation, or just gets me focused on the meditation.
Okay. So 9 things.
9 things. Um, and before I get into the 9 things, the first thing, one of the earliest things that I learned is everything is a meditation. Okay, everything is a meditation. It's just unconscious. We do things unconsciously, but we're doing things. And the minute you bring a level of consciousness, the minute you bring a level of consciousness to your thing doing, you're actually consciously meditating. And the good thing about that is it's focused. Okay, it's a focused thing that you're doing. It could be habitual, things that you do automatically. It could be things at work, things you do with in relationships, lovers, kids, all of those things. The minute you bring a certain level of consciousness, awareness, and breadth and depth to what you're doing, you're meditating. So if you're somebody who doesn't have time to meditate, if you don't have time to meditate, you can always incorporate these ideas into what you're doing as a meditation. Okay. So that was one of the biggest things is understanding that your entire life, your entire life is a meditation. It's just that it's a meditation that's pretty unconscious. So if you're literally paying attention to you're drinking your coffee in the morning, really bring awareness to that. You know, you've taken it for granted, re-smell the coffee, taste it in your mouth, enjoy the coffee. If you're doing a project at work, bring awareness to it, bring your breath to it. And that was one of the biggest things that I had learned, that we literally are meditating all the time. It's just that it's a little unconscious, and we take for granted our everyday experiences, whether they're through people, whether they're at work, whether we're watching a television program. If we all of a sudden just connected to the awareness of what we're doing, then your seated practice becomes a lot easier.
Right.
And
You're kind of resonating with, or you're saying something that resonates with me. I had a mentor in yoga one time teach me that everything is yoga, right? The way you
yeah,
eat, the way you walk, that's yoga. The way you interact with other people, that's yoga, right? And the concept being that how you do anything is how you'll do everything. So if I'm somebody that is meditative in the way that I'm sitting and drinking my coffee in the morning, then I will tend to be in a more meditative state throughout life. I tend to be much more uh, thoughtful in the way that I respond to life or the way that I
yeah.
interact with life. So I absolutely love that. And I think that's a huge awareness. I think Eckhart Tolle talks about that a lot in The Power of Now, that this ability to just be aware of and be present in the moment helps us to realize that there is no past, there is no future. There really is truly only the now.
But today I was doing this is when early on when I was really smiling. This morning I'm sitting at the table, I'm drinking my coffee, and I realized last night I hadn't done the dishes. So I said, let me do the dishes. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do the dishes really slowly. I'm going
Nice.
to
Okay.
soap up the rag. I'm going to feel the hot water in my hands. When I was washing the glass, I just got lost in washing the glass. All of the dishes, I just took my time. I said, when I was putting the dishes on the rack, I said, feel the weight of that dish. And I put the dish away and I felt the weight of it. I was putting it, and I started this really slow movement.
Mm,
And then I knew it was time to meditate when I finished the dishes. When I sat down to meditate, I was there.
that's awesome.
I was there. And one of the things on my 9 list that you know about is the Goggins, we got to live here.
Yeah, we
It
got to live
usually
right
takes me a
here.
while to get there. But when I sat down this morning after doing the dishes really slowly, I sat down and I was there. I closed my eyes. And the first thing I said, we got to live here.
Yeah, I love that. So my very first instructor in Tai Chi taught me that concept of going slow, slow walking, and slow movement. It's amazing what happens when you slow everything down, when you pay attention to the weight of the dishes, when you pay attention to the feel of the bristles of the toothbrush across your teeth. I mean,
Yeah.
there is such a richness to life that we have become completely desensitized to.
And to a degree, you're stopping.
Yeah, yeah, you really are.
Stopping doesn't have to mean literally cease movement. Stopping literally means cease the movement that you've habituated into your life. So if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
start
that's a good point.
walking really slowly as you're walking down the street, as uncomfortable as that might feel, you've stopped. You have
Yeah,
changed how you approach things.
yeah,
And
good
then
point.
and then you try to live in it, because there's going to be the anxiety that comes up whenever you do this. And then, as I told you the other day, it's instead of fighting resistance, you absorb it. You dance with the resistance. So if you have a big resistance, you use a big breath and you swing and dance with it and move it. If you have tiny resistance, it's a little tiny breath and you hold it like you're literally holding a dancer. You've got your hand behind her back or his back. You've got your left hand holding or your right, and you just dance with the resistance. And all of a sudden, the resistance starts to melt because you're not trying to kill it. You're trying to absorb it and become part of you and move with it. And then you control the resistance.
Yeah, and that's a powerful thing. This was one of the points I think that I loved the most when we were talking, because it reminds me of, and I've never studied and practiced the martial art Aikido, but I had a friend that did, that showed me how it worked. And,
Yeah.
the whole concept behind Aikido is that you use other people's energy
Yeah.
either as a deflection or against them. And so one day he says, well, just, grab my wrist. And so I did. He goes, no, like really grab my wrist. The next thing I know, I'm on the ground with my arm behind my back, my wrist bent backwards in excruciating pain because he's thrown me just with me moving. And all he did was move out of the way and use my momentum to throw me to the ground and get me pinned. It was unbelievable. And that taught me this concept of that whatever resistance is coming at you, like you said, if you can dance with it, if it's big
Yeah.
and bold, dance with it. Find a way, find the breath, stand up, get into a deep squat. Whatever it is. If you're feeling big energy that's resisting against you, uh, take your shirt off and look in the mirror. It doesn't matter what you do. Like just make it
Right.
big. If it's small, make it small. Respond, dance with it, but adapt. It's not you. The resistance is not you. How you respond to it, you have the ability to bend and flex and push and pull in a way that can create this massive, massive strength of will inside of you.
Yeah. The other thing is and I do this more often because I when I'm practicing myself, I don't call it resistance, I call it energy, because
Okay.
I can manage energies better. Energy has a less of a connotation of concreteness than resistance. So oftentimes I use the word energy because then I have this fun battle with, a perfect example of eating wrong. I want to go have a piece of crap, and I can feel the energy pulling me toward getting that crap. And I ask myself, are you not fucking stronger than this energy pulling you toward that donut? How much energy do I need to just go, I don't want to do that?
Yeah, there
And
you go.
and that makes it a little bit more fun, but it allows me to see the energy that's pulling me as a weaker energy. It's weaker. Like a donut, Miles, really? A donut? I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning and the donut is out there. Are you really gonna let this donut, the pull of this donut overwhelm you? You are that fucking weak.
But you can dance with it, and then you become the gravitational pull. That's one of
Yeah,
the things
exactly.
in
Yeah,
observing people who know how to dance well and people who practice Aikido. They become the gravitational force.
right, right.
Okay, so I'm lost in the conversation. I love what we're talking about. Where are we at with the nine? You've
Say
got
it again.
nine things. I said I'm
Oh,
loving our conversation, but I got lost on the number. So where are
so
we
there are
at on
nine
that?
things. So the first one, I'll just give a quick overview. The first one
All right, let's do
comes
the
with
overview.
Andrew, from Andrew Huberman.
Okay.
It's autonomic arousal, and this one blew my mind because in learning anything, learning means absorbing information and then
Yep.
taking it apart to create new things with that. Now, everybody learns differently. So I'm not going to speak on how people learn, but I know the one absolute constant is learning is taking on new information. And then learning it so well, you can rearrange it to come up with something new. That's when you start entering the realm of creativity.
Yeah.
So imagine a kid who comes from a household that's loud, emotionally charged people hollering all the time, bright lights. Some kids come from abusive situations. Some kids come from, not enough food anxiety. How do you learn from that? How do you learn in that atmosphere? And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
the kid gets grown and he or she goes out into the world, high school, college, where the demand is to learn. Well, that kid is autonomically aroused all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very difficult for him or her to sit in a room and a teacher assigns a dense reading, or you have to figure out mathematical problems. If you can't calm yourself down physically and emotionally and psychically because you're autonomically aroused.
Okay.
So so that's one of the first things I look at. And when I sit down, am I autonomically aroused? And I didn't come from that type of situation, but there was noise. So that's the one thing. One of the other things on the list I start to say to myself, marginal gains. That's it. So
Okay.
that whenever I feel like I'm in the meditation, something's happening, I say, okay, stay here and build on this. Because to get to that place that we're talking about is actually kind of easy. The hard part is learning the endurance of it. How do you, if you feel like have arrived at this meditational place, he's like, how do I do this now for an hour? So there's the marginal gains.
Okay.
If you can get it to 2 minutes, you can get it to 4. But you always have to pay attention. And this brings me to another one of the elements on the list. But you always have to pay attention to it and breathe through. If your ceiling is 1 minute and you want to get to 1 minute and 15 seconds, what's going to happen at 1 minute is you are going to feel your resistance rise at that 1 minute mark.
Okay.
And then you dance with it, you play with it, you use your breath to ease you into 1 minute and 15 seconds. There is no rush to get this done. Especially if you say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to try to do this for the rest of my life. If you look at it in terms of that, say you're a 30-year-old man or woman, and let's say hypothetically you're going to die at 100, you got time.
Yeah, you got plenty of time.
You got plenty of time. So you can do 1 minute to 1 minute and 10 seconds. And after a while, it will exponentially grow. That 2 minutes will turn into 7 minutes, 7 to 10. From 10 to 11, you might have some problems, but you'll eventually get to 15. But you really, the most important part is not figuring out how long you want to go. It's dealing with the present moment of the resistance when it hits.
Well, you brought up an interesting point. I actually just did a calculation while you're talking. If you meditate for 5 minutes, 365 days a year for 30 years, so if you're 30 years old, by the time you get to 60, that's 273,750 minutes of meditation. That's
You
massive.
are the Buddha.
At that
you have
point,
achieved Buddhahood.
Yeah, at that point, you've done 4,562 hours. Now, I might be doing my math wrong here. Somebody may say, hey, Steve, you did that wrong, but I think I did it right.
Nobody's going to challenge that.
4,562 hours of meditation over those years. There's a compounding effect to that. And if you're talking about marginal gains, like you get a marginal gain each time, or let's say that you get a marginal gain half the time, that's a lot of hours of marginal gain. That's a lot of minutes of marginal gain.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got autonomic arousal. You
Marginal
focus
gains.
on marginal gains. Breathe
Paying
through the
attention.
ceiling. right?
Right.
Okay.
Paying attention to the feeling and sensation of the focus, because that's really
Okay.
that's really important. The biggest takeaway is pay attention to the feeling and sensation, because then you can have more to play with. Number
I think that's
4
an
on the
important
list.
one. That's huge.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the sensation. Far too many people don't do that. That's actually
Yeah.
something that I teach people when they're paying, when we're breaking through limiting beliefs. Is it, where do you feel it in your body? And most people have no awareness whatsoever of where they feel stress in the body.
Yeah.
But every limiting belief lives somewhere in your body. It'll rise up through your neck, through your eyes, through your stomach, through your,
Right.
wherever. You're going to feel it somewhere.
Hugely
So
important.
yeah, becoming aware of those sensations is crucial. Okay, so what's the next one?
And so now this is a bigger phrase. Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, has a phrase where he says, the emphasis on softness means the opposite of rigidity and is synonymous with suppleness and endurance. And that's just a phrase that one of those phrases I keep in my head when I get to a certain place, because it's funny how I used to think endurance meant grit.
Yep. Yep.
You got to dig through this to stay part of it. And there's some people that can do that. It's the one thing about all of this is that there's so many different people on the planet. Some of these things that I'm saying, somebody might look at it and go, that's bullshit, because I do it another way.
Yeah.
And that's legit. The only illegit part is saying my way is a bullshit way. But to say that he or she gets there through a whole nother modes of operation, that's totally legit, because there are some people that grit their teeth and they grind it out.
Yeah. Right.
And if that works for you, then you use that. All things exist, and if it works for you, you use it. So I like the idea of being supple and soft and gentle, because I can feel that. And if I can feel it, I can sustain it. And in sustaining it is my endurance.
Yeah. I'm
So,
both ways. Like I find that there are times where there's got to be a supple nature to what I'm doing in order
right,
for me to stick with it. I've got to be less rigid. But there are times where if something's difficult, I've got to square my jaw, square my shoulders, tighten up, dig in, and just go forward. And I've got to
right,
go, I got to push,
right.
whatever it is. If I'm working out, if I've got a difficult project at work that I have to do, if
Yeah,
I'm in a tough conversation, coaching an executive or another leader, I've got to sometimes just lean in, and that's tough to do, but at the same time, I love that quote by Lao Tzu, because there does need to be a certain suppleness, a certain softness
yeah,
to balance out that rigidity.
yeah. It's funny because two of the books and two of the guys that I follow the most are David Goggins and Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I think of Joe Dispenza is the soft part of Goggins, and Goggins is the hard, gritty part of Joe Dispenza. Because when you read their books, they are saying the exact same thing through two different methodologies. David
Yeah,
Goggins, if
yeah,
you know anything about his life, is grind through it, be uncomfortable. There's no time to be soft.
yep, yep,
And Joe Dispenza is be aware, pay attention to your habitual patterns, stop
yep,
living the same moments every single day that keep firing and wiring the same habits and emotions and experiences every day. Two men, drastically different, preaching the same messages.
yeah. And great methodologies, both of them.
Right. Great methodologies.
Okay, so
And
we
that's
got
why,
Lao Tzu. So you hold Lao
right,
Tzu in your mind. What's the next one?
right. The other one is, once we start to understand intellectually in meditation is always look for the meditational aspects of anything that you're doing, so that
Okay.
you can actually practice this putting on a pair of pants. You can practice this, as you said earlier, brushing your teeth, drinking your coffee, because that will help you get to these places when you want to sit down and just have a quiet practice of doing nothing.
Yeah.
You can practice doing nothing when you're doing something. And that's another um, portion or idea of Lao Tzu. doing by not doing. And the not doing means pay attention. And it's like if you've ever done anything where you get into the flow, that's the whole idea of doing by not doing. When you're in flow, you don't feel like you're doing anything. You are flowing with the moment. That's the Eastern mystical version of doing by not doing.
And I know
So,
there's a listener out there, that is commuting to work, and when they hop on the subway or they get on the train, they immediately will reach for their phone.
right.
If you're commuting 30, 40, 50 minutes to work, an hour,
Oh,
whatever, there's time for you to do nothing, to just sit, to observe, to pay attention to the breath. There's so many different pieces. If you're not doing that, you have multiple points during the day to just sit and observe while you're doing whatever it is. If you're preparing your meal, slow it down and make the best meal that you can. Oh, Steve, I don't have time to prepare my food. I don't believe that. I go just make something very simple. Give
right.
yourself 5 minutes to make yourself some eggs, but slow down, and then give yourself 5 minutes to eat those eggs, and don't just shove it down your throat. Slow it down. I think that is so crucial. Look for the meditational aspects in everything you do. Okay, what's
I have
next?
Well, I have a friend. He's always telling me he doesn't have time to prep his meals, but it seems like every time I call him, he's sitting on his couch watching sports.
Yeah, yeah. We don't have time to prep our meals to make good food, but we can sit around and talk about sports. We can do all sorts of mental masturbation all day long, right? And
Yeah,
yet we don't have time to make a meal that takes 10 minutes to make. That makes no sense to me.
yeah. It's like that rich dad, poor dad metaphor of the Starbucks coffee, the latte. You go get a latte at a New York Times, and if you do that every day, at the end of a month, you've spent $150. And at the end of
Yeah.
a year, you could have had enough money to invest in some stocks.
Yep. Yeah. It's amazing what happens. I've had people give me a hard time before because there's times where I'll show up with my breakfast at work, and a typical breakfast that I kind of rotate in is where I'll take a steak, cook it up in the morning, and do eggs, and then with steak, the eggs, and I'll take some pistachios, and that's a great breakfast for me. And people will look at this like, "How do you do this? This is crazy. I don't have time for that." I said, "It takes me 10 minutes at the most." I start out, I saute some onions, maybe some garlic. I cut the steak up so it cooks very easily. I throw
Yeah,
that in. It takes 2 or 3 minutes for it to cook up the way that I want it to. I
yep,
take that off. I cook the eggs. I throw it in the container, and I'm ready to go. So it's 10
yeah,
minutes. Oh, I couldn't do that. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Whatever you want to tell yourself. It's extremely simple to do. Okay, so look for the meditational aspects in everything we do. What's next?
Yep. Feel your weight. I feel my weight all the time. How heavy I am. Okay, just I can feel my feet planted in the earth. I can
Not
feel
just
my butt.
physical weight, right? When
No,
you feel
physical
your
weight.
weight,
Yeah,
you're feeling your physical weight. Okay, okay. Talk through
because you
this.
want to feel that energy. Because remember, if everything is energy, you're just connecting with other energy when you have your feet planted on the ground, your
Okay,
butt, you can feel it in your chair, your shoulders dropping. Feel your weight
I'm
because
feeling you. Okay,
it brings you to the present moment. When you're not in the present moment, you can't feel your body. But when you're in the present moment, your body you can feel like, oh, I'm weighted. I feel it down. It's almost as if you're doing shavasana at the end of your
mm,
yoga practice, where
yep.
you've worked out so hard and now you're laying there and you can feel your entire being. So that's really what it is. Feel your being. Um,
Okay,
the other one right after that is another phrase that I love. It said the phrase is, to be restless is to lose one's self mastery. And I use this all the time because I am a pretty restless person. So when I feel squirmy, I'm thinking to be restless is to lose one's self mastery, that I'm losing self mastery and I don't want to. So it automatically makes me calm down.
I like that.
I
Okay,
just settle in. And then Number 8 is we gotta live here, which is a David Goggins saying.
David Goggins.
We gotta live here. And that's when you realize that you're there, that you're feeling your weight, you feel your breath, you're present. Everything has slowed down. Any psychic, physical, emotional stuff that's going on, you've dealt with, you're settled. This is the place you want to be. We got to live here.
I like
And
that.
right behind we got to live here is there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. You don't want to go to the beach. You don't want to think I could be in a better place right now. No, there's nowhere to go. This is the moment. I've arrived here. And then you just try to expand on that.
I love that one.
Not,
that one, it really resonates. I read something recently that said that one of the main reasons, so there's two types of people that purchase luxury items. Okay. The first type of person is somebody that can afford that luxury item and they resonate with the quality of it. So there's a qualitative aspect. They value quality in their life. They want quality. They buy the luxury item because it resonates with their own personal values, and they don't want to spend money on things that won't last, right? Now, that's less common. The more common is people who buy luxury items who can't afford them and who feel disempowered in their life. And so what they do is they buy a luxury item. Maybe it's the Cadillac or whatever it is, but they buy that luxury item as a way to steal power from that item. They don't feel powerful, and so they're trying to borrow from something else. And when you say that ninth one, of there's nowhere else to go, this is the one that resonates, I think, with if you have a habit of running away, if you have a habit of spending money on stuff that you can't afford, if you have a habit of eating food in excess, if you have any of these limiting beliefs or any of these habits that are self-sabotaging in nature, can be solved over time with this mindset. There's nowhere else to go. Because if you go buy that Cadillac and you're trying to steal power from it, you're still the same person. You are still the same individual that doesn't have self-mastery. You are still the same sad human being. You're now just trying to buy your happiness. You're trying to borrow power from whatever it is that you've now purchased. So I think that one really resonates, that is, this is where we live. We got to live here, and then there's nowhere else to go. That's the reality. That's the truth. You can't get out of your body. You can pretend to, but your body's going to remind you that it's there.
Yeah, remember I used to talk about, and when I taught the meditation class at Lifetime, I would use the reverse to get people to relax. Yeah. And one of the things, instead of trying to get people to calm their minds down, I would literally ask them to go on a journey with their mind, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I would have them look at their bodies and understand that no matter where your mind goes, and your mind can go to the past, to the future, past pains, past pleasure, anticipating future pleasures, future pains, your mind can go everywhere. Your body is always present. The body is here. So let's use our body to send a signal to the mind that we would like to calm down.
Yeah.
The body is asking the mind, can you calm down? We want to help you calm down and be with us instead of using the mind to rile up the body, because the body doesn't go anywhere. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat down and thought about, I remember that trip to Panama, and literally my mind is in Panama doing all the things we did in Panama, and I open my eyes and I'm sitting in my fucking living room.
And you don't have the beautiful scenery of Panama.
Right.
I love that.
So sometimes use the body to still the mind, because the body is always present.
Yeah. Okay, so let's review these 9 for our listeners. I want to make sure that our listeners have them, but I want to make sure that our listeners understand something that I love this phrase. I've stolen it from you. but you talk about it regularly of playing with an idea. Just play with this, just play
Yeah.
with that, right?
Yeah. That's important.
And maybe our listeners don't understand what that is because far too often we get away from playing. We used to play when we were kids. We'd run, we'd climb a tree, we'd play basketball, whatever it was. We would play. There was almost no objective to it other than just to have fun. It's the same thing. When you're playing
Yeah.
with an idea, when you're playing with and kind of testing these things out in your life, you're truly just playing with it. You're doing it for the pure enjoyment. And you should find some enjoyment in doing it if you release all of these expectations that you should be this and you should be that. Don't should on yourself and tell yourself that you should be doing this or should be that or should be a better person, whatever. Stop shoulding on yourself and just play with these things. So the first one, Miles, you said, pay attention to the autonomic arousal.
Right.
Where are you starting this from? The second one has to do with marginal gains.
Yep.
Wherever you're at, try to make some sort of improvement small. Don't make it big. You're not going to go from never meditating to a state of becoming the Buddha in one day. Just marginal gains over time, and they will compound. The third one is pay attention to the sensations and the emotions. And then the fourth one, I want you to read the quote again because I absolutely love the quote, and I want people to hear the quote from Lao Tzu.
It's Lao Tzu's emphasis on softness means the opposite of rigidity and is
Okay.
synonymous with suppleness and endurance.
I love that. Fifth, look for the meditational aspects of everything you do. So this is for those of you out there that are saying, I don't have time. Just pick whatever you're doing during the day, slow it down, make it meditative. The sixth one, feel your weight, get into the
Feel
body.
your presence, yep, and your weight, yep.
Feel the presence, feel the weight. The seventh is to remind yourself.
To be restless is to lose one's self-mastery.
Yeah. Don't let that restlessness take control of you. You take control of it.
Right.
Number 8, this is where we live.
We got to live here.
We got to live here. That's one of my favorites. When I get into lifting sessions, I'll come up to a particularly difficult exercise that I know I'm trying to push more weight or push more repetitions.
Yeah.
And I just look at the bar or the dumbbells or whatever it is, and I say, we got to live right here. This is the pain cave we're going into. And then number 9, there is nowhere else to go, which is the truth. You can't run away from your body. You cannot run away from your soul. It is there all the time.
All the time.
No
matter where you go.
Right?
What is that? I got that from an old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie with Total Recall, when he's getting his mind altered, and the guy that's altering his mind says he said he's going to try to go to Mars, and the guy goes, no matter where you go, there you are.
And we're going to leave it on that. Well, and on that note, folks, it is time for us to wrap up another Evolve podcast. I want to thank my guest and co-host, W. Myles Riley, for imparting his wisdom and his practice with us today. Myles, what a cool conversation. Thanks for taking our personal phone call and turning it into a podcast. We talk about that all the time.
You know how many podcasts we could do based on our phone calls alone?
We say that all the time because we talk regularly, and then we get finished, we're like, oh, that was a good podcast. But we never make them into podcasts. So I think this is the first time that we're actually taking one of our conversations and turning it into a podcast. So folks, hey, one of the best ways that you can help to support Myles and our Evolve podcast is just go follow us on Instagram. It's Evolve _cast. And you can find us on the World Wide Web at www.evolve-cast.com. We have changed up the shop a bit. If you go to the website, and you'll see that we've got the hats, we've got a few shirts on there. We've discontinued several items, but we kept the ones that we like the best and the ones that you seem to like as well, that are our best sellers. So go check those out. That's a great way to help to support the podcast. And if you like this episode, give us a rating, share it with your family and friends. We'd also love to hear from you. Like we mentioned earlier, if you have some sort of interest in meditation and you've seen some benefits from it, shoot us a DM and you can be entered to win that hat. Remember, folks, that it takes time and consistency to evolve, but first you have to disrupt. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve.
And evolve.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve Podcast. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. Follow us on Instagram at evolve_cast and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcasting app. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve.